Hey, this is Keith here. Thanks for joining me on another edition of In the Editing Room. This one, we're going to be starting outside of the editing room, but we're going to end up there. What I've got going on is a single setup interview, and I'm going to be showing you how to set up for that interview. In this case, it will be a black background, 3-point lighting, possibly going to use the softbox for some backlighting, maybe not. We're going to see how that goes. Basically, what we're going to do here is show you how to set up for an interview in case you're an editor in a situation where you have to film something. And then we're going to take that footage, and this episode will end up in the editing room taking care of the rest of the project. So as you can see, to get started here, I got a mess in my basement. But I've got all the equipment down here ready to go and in place. Some extra equipment, of course, that I won't be using for this. I will be setting up the black backdrop. As you see, I've already taken down the green screen, so I'm going to be putting the black one up, and they'll just kind of clip to the with clamps like this to the top of the ceiling of the roof or whatever. Not roof, but this, I'm in my basement, so that's my first floor. But the ceiling of the basement, rafters, is that what you call them? I am not in construction. Anyways, I'm going to pause this, get some stuff set up, and whenever, as I'm going through the process of setting this up, I will hit record again and just kind of talk through some of the things that I'm doing. Okay, so you see the first thing that I've done is cleared the area completely, and you want to make sure if you have a client coming in, you want to make sure it's as clean as possible. I'm not able to do that in the time that I have here, so it is a little bit of a mess still, like kind of around the edges. But this is our basement, this is my home, so it doesn't have to be perfect. We use this area for storage, and I use it for a studio. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but the main area where you're going to be capturing your content, you want to clean up the best you can. So as you can see, I've got the stool there for the subject that we're interviewing to sit on, nice and comfortable, and then we have a power strip coming in and an extra power cable there to, if I need it to reach something. Now the next step is to get the black curtain up, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Voila, there we go. Okay, so it's looking better already, right? Let's get up a little closer here. Now you can see I've got some wrinkles and things with the lighting I'm using now. I hope you could see that, and that's okay. These clamps up here, I've just got it kind of nice and tight across the top, and the clamps are visible, and that's okay because the shot is, it won't be visible in the shot, but you can see I've got some wrinkles in here, so I'm going to maybe tighten up some of the edges, but truth be told, we're not going to have a set of lights shining directly on it like I've got just the overhead light shining on it now. That will be off, and the lights will be illuminating the subject more so than the back, but I'm going to tighten it up a little bit. If this was a green screen, this would be an issue, but the black color is really going to be almost leveled out and contrasted out, maybe, if you will, and we'll get to that when we get into the editing room. But the next thing for me to do is go ahead and set up the lights around the area. Alright, so as I'm setting up my light stands here, I came across a little tidbit of information I thought I'd pass along. When you're setting up your stands, and by the way, this goes for tripod legs as well, but this happens to be a light stand, so that I've got, as you see, I've got the legs down here nice and wide, and I've got the options here, kind of go like this here, to bring up two extra poles, a thinner one and then one that's a little bit more thicker. Now when you have this option, and normally you will, you don't want to go with from the thick one, the main one, to a thin one and skip your level in between. We'll get rid of that one, and what we want to do is use the thicker side to get our height, okay? What this does is it keeps the thin rod inside the medium rod, and that's going to allow more stability for us and for this light that's going to be sitting on it. It's a very small light actually that I'm using today, so it's really not that big of a deal, but anytime you have an option when you need to go taller, you don't want to extend your thinnest leg because that's going to be less stable. Keep it as thick as you can. The taller you go. Okay, so I've got my lights set up, and already you could see just in the quality of this video on my cell phone here that a really nice lighting kit is useful. It's lighting me very well. I don't have them set perfectly, but it's just a lot nicer than your regular home lighting of I just kind of look washed out a little bit. But these lights really do a good job. Of a professional lighting kit really does take your video to a next level, and I do recommend it. This is a newer brand of light, literally Neewer. It also happens to be newer to me. Recently purchased this, so I'm really enjoying it so far, because it does have, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this. Yeah, there we go. It has a dimmer, and it has, you can add more yellow into or take away some of the white color. So you can work with making it look a little more natural or softer, or you can get pretty bright, stark white lighting. This is the setup right now. 3-point setup, left, right, and one from the top back. So that's what we're looking to do. Again, I might kind of straighten out the curtain a little bit. This overhead light will be off, so it'll be a little bit different. The next step is to set up the camera. So the first part of the camera setup is the tripod. So whether you're going to be using a regular old cheap tripod, a good photography tripod, or a video tripod, this is, that video head needs to be mounted on there still, but what you want is for the lens of the camera to be about eye level with your subject. So what I like to do is just kind of gauge where that is by sitting where the subject is going to be. And in this case, Dan, who will be telling his story in this episode, is about as tall as me, maybe slightly shorter if I remember correctly. But when sitting, we're right about the same. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up right about my eye-mouth level. Right about here, and I just looking for visual gauges as I go this way. It's right about here on this light, so that's the visual range that I'm gonna be in. That way when he comes in and he actually sits down, I'm gonna be close, to that eye level, to his eye level. So when he sits down, I can get the lights on, get that going, and then I can adjust the tripod perfectly to where it needs to be, and then we can get off and running a lot quicker. Okay, so you can see I'm just about ready to go. Got the lights, got the area cleared, backdrop's good. I've got the camera mounted, and I think if you can take a look here, you're gonna see it's camera. Sorry, let me get the light there in the background. Yep, the lens here is about level with eye level of where I'm anticipating Dan's eyes to be. But now the last step of setup, well, there's a couple more steps, but one is the audio. Now, whether you're going to be using your camera's onboard audio, an external mic like a boom mic, you can make the decision of whether you want to leave it here on your camera, or if you wanted to have a boom arm come over from the top, you can relocate this mic out there if you needed to. In this shoot, I'm going to be using a lavalier mic. That's what I'm gonna set up now. Okay, so here I have the lavalier mic system set up. We have our mic here. This is a little tiny lavalier mic with a wind cap on it. Obviously I don't need that on there because we're not outside in the wind today, but I'm going to leave it on there anyways. And that plugs into the transmitter right here, and that sends a signal to the receiver, and this will plug in there, and that will send the audio signal right into my camera. And this whole part of it gets mounted right onto my camera. And then of course over here we have extra batteries and a different type of cable if I was going into a different type of camera. This part of it right here is what Dan will be wearing that on his back, and this will be run up kind of underneath depending on what he's wearing. It could be over the top, back over the shoulder. Or another option would be to literally hang it from the ceiling down here, just out of the shot. Okay, so this is the receiver, and as you can see here, I've got the hot shoe mount clipped on the back of this. That is removable, but for this situation I do want it mounted onto my camera, so my hot shoe placement is right up here, so I will just kind of slide that right in. I should be able to do this with one hand. Yep, there we go. There we go, nice and tight. Kind of just bring this down just to make sure it locks in there nice and tight. When you're screwing things in, this goes for tripods, light stands, little connectors here and there. Snug is all you want. Don't go tight. Don't break things. You wear things down quicker that way. You just need it nice and snug. Don't really crank or anything or get it super tight. That's going to wear your equipment out. Anyways, okay, so now what I need to do is take this right here, and this will plug in to this guy, and these are really nice because they plug in and then they also screw in, so that's kind of like a locking mechanism. I'm going the wrong way. Locking mechanism there, so that will stay in case anything snags. That's not coming out, because the last thing you want to do is lose audio and not know about it. So it's really nice that those kind of lock in there. And then the other one of these is going to go into the camera's port 2. So input 1 is the boom mic here, and input 2 is my wireless lavalier mic. And I will be capturing with both mics, because as you see here, this camera has the capability to record simultaneous channels. That is stereo on both, which is really nice. So I can choose, once we get into the editing room, I can choose which audio is better, or I can blend the two mics and use both if I needed to. One last thing about audio. Did you hear that? I'm not sure if you can hear that from my phone picking that up, but here in the basement, that is a furnace. Well, it's an air conditioning unit running. When we hit record, that will be off. That is a huge tip. Just anything you can do to control extra noise in your environment, do it. Absolutely do it. Turn music down, off. Tell everyone else in your house not to stomp around or do anything crazy while you're recording. Make sure your subject and you yourself aren't wearing any jewelry that when you move makes noise. That is always a pain. So you'll just need to be conscious of those things and make sure you've got all those noise makers in your household or your shooting area taken care of and minimized. The last step is basically just setting up the camera to make sure that things are in focus so that you're pretty much prepared. I'm going to turn the lights on. I'm going to do what I call a makeshift. I got a box over here that I'm going to set in place so I can focus on that. Look at how the light hits it and adjust my camera settings appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will. I'll talk a little bit about what I did there and how I did that to best prepare for when Dan comes in, and then we'll have Dan come in and do his thing, and from there we'll be up in the editing room. So hang in there. Okay, now I am finally ready to go. I'm ready for Dan. As you can see, I've got my my makeshift person tower here, and there is thought to the madness. First of all, I've picked something white so that I can white balance it, and then I've got a couple of corners just to see how shadows work with where the lights are, and exactly, of course, this is not a human face, so everything will have to be readjusted. This is a pre-production type situation, and then I have a rounded dark. Well, actually, what this is a macro lens thing, but I've got that just on the top, just so I can see from that camera, how it looks. So, and of course, right now it's still daylight. This interview will be taking place at night, so I will wait until it's completely dark until I white balance and have a correct lighting situation. But for right now, pretty good setup. We got the lights in place, the camera's ready to go, backdrop's there. It's nice and clean for Dan to come in, sit down, get comfortable, and just do his thing. So we're gonna do that next, and then we will pop up into the editing room to finish out the product. Okay, so now that it is dark outside, we can see that we have only the lights on that we will be utilizing. What that means for me is I can get a correct white balance on the camera, and I'm also going to want to make sure that I've got my codecs right. That means making sure the camera's going to shoot in the format that I want it to, with the right resolution, frame rate, and all those sort of things. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and Dan should be here in a little bit, and we'll get him we'll remove our little temporary structure, and we'll pop Dan down, and we'll be good to go. All right, so Dan is here now, so we are ready to go. And good thing I did all that prep work, because I really do feel prepared. Doesn't that make you feel good?
I feel good.
Yeah. And this is Dan, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
So we are ready to go. I'm just going to do some quick framing up stuff, and you know, some quick adjustments to the camera to make sure that everything is squared away. And then I'm going to hit record, and then we will finish up and take this right up to the editing room. So we'll see you there. Okay, so we are now up in the editing room for Team Boyle Foundation. This is the project, and it's Dan's story. That was the interview that we shot down in the basement, which is actually really wasn't an interview. It was more of him telling his story. And that project, as it turned out, was sort of under a time crunch. Not really a crunch, but it had a time limit. It had a due date where he needed the video to be completed and done. So instead of actually recording the rest of this episode, I didn't have time to make the tutorial or the follow along like I normally do on the In the Editing Room episodes. So the project is already completed, and I have it here. Actually, I have it open already, I thought. Yep. Here we go. So I have it here completed, but since I didn't get to record me actually doing all of this, now that I have some more time later in the week here, what I'm gonna do is kind of go over all of the things I've done to come up with this final product. So the first thing was, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of reconstruct this a little bit for you, and we'll refer to this as a final. I'll keep going and referring to where, you know, the reconstruction version to the actual final version of what I have here. So what I did was I started with a template, which was a plugged start, this one right here. And all this is a template that I've created to help me get started with projects quicker. Instead of Vegas, the editor opening with nothing here, I have overlays. I have some, audio tracks already built in down here, video tracks built in, and then some crazy wild presets for video tracks up at the top, which normally I wouldn't use, but sometimes if I do need to use them, it's nice for me to know that it's already plugged in here, hence the reason I call this plugged start, so I can do a lot of crazy stuff and not have to spend time building all of that stuff. In this preset, I have all of this stuff, which I'm not going to use, so I can delete that. I did keep this white background because I did need to use the white background occasionally. So to get started, really I bring that clip in, and this is the interview of Dan. And the first thing I want to show you is this, and I'll put this on a full, whoops, that's the one I want. Put this on a full screen, and let me get on a, there we go, better image of Dan there. And I wanted to show you this preview window right here on a full screen. It's on the full screen over here where you can't see on a different screen, and that's what this button does. But what I'll do instead, since this is only recording this screen, is I will pop this preview out so we can see this larger. And as you can see, you know, it came out fairly well. There's some gray, and I can see a couple of wrinkles here. I'm not sure how well you can see this, but there's some. And so what I did was I opened up the scopes, and I'll do this by going to view. Yeah, going to view, window, down here, video scopes. And I used a waveform here to really make sure my contrast was correct. So I'll make, actually what I really want to do, have my preview here and my waveform underneath it. And I'll explain why in a second as soon as I make this. Yeah. So from left to right here, it corresponds with what's happening on the actual video. As you can see here on the left side, there's nothing but black or almost black, because 0 on this waveform is the deepest black, and then it goes -20 to sub-level deep blacks, which really aren't going to show up. But as you can see here, this white line across, it corresponds to the black, but it's not pure black what I have. It's actually a very, very deep gray, but I need it to be black because I need to get rid of those little wrinkles that you can see in that screen in the back. And then as I play along in the playhead here, you can see how it moves along in correspondence with the light, or the luminance, as this waveform is reading luminance. It corresponds with the light and colors of the actual video. So all that means is from left to right corresponds with the video, what's happening left to right. Now, vertically, top to bottom, 0, as I said already, is black, and up here at 100 is white. You could also look at it as the darkest spots and the brightest spots if you wanted to. And all the range in between is the color space. That is a full, and that's based on what's called Rec 709, which is a color space. And that's very advanced. We don't need to go, I'm not going to explain that here in this video. But with the color space of Rec 709, I believe, I can't remember exactly right now, but it is 0 to 100, or it might actually be 0 to 90. Anyways, there is color space above it, 109, and that is basically what's called super whites, and that we're not going to have anything in here. But right here, what I'm getting from this waveform image is that my blacks aren't exactly all the way as black as I need them to be, and here where Dan is, his colors aren't as bright. They don't fill in as much as what I'd like it to. So what I'm going to use is the levels, and I'll just do this right here on this track. So I'll utilize my levels, and as you see, the input start here will start to drop this white line of color information on the graph, on the waveform, below 0. I'm going to come in so that they go pretty far and they flatten out. You see that? It's all flattened out there. That's at the bottom of my color space. And as I toggle this on and off, you can see right away how much I've taken away of that screen in the background. Now, obviously, Dan has been contrasted out a little bit as well. And I'm further away from where the range I need him to be. I need all of this color information to kind of stretch out. And when I bring the end level in, that'll bring those colors back up without bringing any of the deep blacks out. So basically what I've done is I've stretched the contrast into a range of where I want it to be. So my starting image right here, not a lot of color information there, too much color information down here, which is why this has this gray glossy looking, or this film of gray over the top. So when I bring it up, now I have a correctly exposed image, or a better exposed. It's not, obviously, this was my exposure as when I did the recording, and it's not bad, but it needed work. So that's where the levels and the waveform comes in for me to get a better looking image. And it looks much cleaner, it looks much nicer. The other thing I did was I added a color corrector, this right here, to give Dan a little bit more of a natural feel. Here it actually looks pretty good, but in the video I actually came away from the pink colors and red colors of his face, and I don't think I went that far in the actual video, but I just kind of bumped away from the pink and red colors just to give him a little bit more natural of a color, because it does look like he doesn't normally look that red in his face. He's a tan guy, so I wanted his dark skin to come through, but he's not that red normally when you look at him in real life. So that's what I'm trying to match here. And so I did that by pulling away from the red colors and the pink colors in the low, mid, and high wheels here. And I'll toggle that. That's off. A little bit too red there, and that kind of evens them out. Okay, so and I can get rid of that now, and let me go back to my view, window layouts, just my one screen editing. That pops this back in there for me. So I'll bring up. So the next thing I did was I focused on the audio. And you know what, I'm just going to show you how all this worked out here. This was all cut and edited. So here's Dan talking in the beginning, and then we overlay a bunch of pictures up here, and then we come back to Dan over here. So I needed to make sure that his audio levels maintained and were cut. You know, if he made a mistake reading, that's what these cuts are to make it sound natural and flowing. So at the end, you'll see that this volume had to come down a little bit more to match the rest of the volume levels. And I'll show you what I mean. I'll put this on mute so you don't hear the music.
For many, it will be their only vacation.
It's
and
right
so we
here,
are not taking this light.
Right around -6 decibels. But this one, if I bring the volume up, it was
that my story can be shared to inspire others through
a little bit higher than that, about 3. So that's why at this one down here, I came down a few decibels.
We want to be sure to raise all that we'll need to make it a success. Courtney's inspired me, and I do hope that my story...
And that way, when it got into that audio clip, it matches the rest of the audio. So moving on, let's take a look at the images here. And basically each one of these was plugged in, and I kind of matched up each image to better match what he was talking about through the duration of his story. And on each one of these, now this kind of fades in. So what I'll do for now is get rid of that fade. For each one of these, they are also keyframed. So as we go through the clip, you can see, watch here as I go through, and I'll start over. So watch over here, you know, it has that nice little zoom. And what I'll do is I'll restructure this one so that you can see. So at default, this is what we had. When I brought the picture onto the timeline, we have these black lines. It doesn't fill the full screen of what we're working with. So we open up the pan crop feature, and we go to, we want to make sure we select our 16:9 aspect ratio. And as you could see, it zoomed it in basically to fill in the full screen. Now this video was rendered out in 1920 by 1080, and this picture is 960 by 540. So it's not going to have it's not going to carry over the best quality all the way through, but it's good enough. What I don't want is to zoom in too much, because that's losing detail. Another thing I want to do while I'm doing image work and color correcting work usually, which I didn't do before, but I should have mentioned this before, is put the preview either on full or best full to get the best result. So here it's on best full, but as you can see, it's zoomed in. It's not, I mean, it's a good image, but it's not, it's a little bit pixelated just because it's zoomed in so much. As you can see, I've zoomed it in to 412, so I'm losing so much resolution. So if I go back to my full 960 540, that's better, but I want it to zoom in kind of nice like I had before, so I'll set it and I'll only go slightly in. Actually, we'll go back to the default and I'll just go up, and then right here at the end it'll make a keyframe, and now I want it to kind of zoom right there. So as it plays over, it kind of zooms right in nicely on them. And now this next image, you notice I have, I'll mute this underneath. You notice I have vertical images, and there were quite a few vertical images. So what I did here was create this another track underneath, duplicated the image, and I just left this one on top as is, and I did the nice same keyframe, so it kind of zooms in a little bit. And underneath, I set what I call a blur back and put this defocus effect on it, so that the image in the background behind it, underneath it, is the same image of Courtney here, but it's blurred out and it's in the back. And it as well has the same type of keyframe movement as it goes. It kind of zooms in. So as you go, you feel like, even though it's a vertical image, you have some, rather than having the black space behind it, you've got something nicer to fill out the screen. Okay, now the only other things that were added were this logo up here, as he was talking about Team Boyle Foundation that Dan and his daughter, they run. And well, I'll let you watch this whole video to get the whole story, but it is really awesome. And then there was another lower third eye logo thing that was put together here. And I'll talk about just this transition right here. As you can see, this transition kind of slides the logo right in. And the transition is just a push. And I got to that by going to transitions, finding pushes, and choosing which way I wanted it to slide in. And so that slides in from the top right. And then, of course, that slides out, and the other one slides in when he starts talking about what they do with Challenger Baseball. Now, here's a cool one. They talk about the Disney Princess Run. And this video was a vertical video, which is always tough to use, but there's Dan. So it's just not that good of a quality video. But what I did to make it better was I zoomed in and notice the multiple keyframes through this to follow along with Dan, but also to notice the start of the race where the fireworks go off, and then you'll notice the keyframe drops down so that you could see Dan come, and it just kind of zooms in and follows along with Dan a little bit better. So yeah, that worked out pretty nice. And finally, the end closing slide, which is just the logo and some text that came in that says "Thanks for watching." And text is easily added just by going to your insert text icon. We'll get rid of that. And then, of course, the text was matched. The color was matching his logo to make it look nice. So that's basically it. One other awesome, really cool thing is that Dan made this video for the Ohio Lottery in Lindor, who's a Cleveland Indian, and they won. This video won, and so Team Boyle, they got some money that's going to fund their next races and things like that, and so really, really awesome, and proud of Dan for doing all of this, Dan and Courtney. And just watch this full video, and I'll put the link. I'll either have it pop up at this point on the YouTube player, or find a description below if you're viewing on Facebook. But really, really awesome stuff here, and was really happy that Dan allowed me to make this video for him, and just super happy that they won, and they won some money, quite a big chunk of money, and that's going to be used for the foundation. And they just do so much amazing stuff for special needs kids, not just in the United States but all over the world. So check this out. Check out Dan's full story, and thank you very much for watching. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.